of it.
Yeah, you'll have
you
a
know?
lot.
Like,
Too much.
yeah, exactly. Because really, it sucks. It's so hard. Like I'm supposed to make 5 videos a month for that one thing. And last month I made one story that I paid for, like before I found the other guy, you know?
Right.
I only made one.
Oh, really?
Well, because like
you
from
found
all
the
the
other guy.
podcasts, and from all the podcasts, like they just keep giving me content. And so that's way better. I don't have to do anything, you know? So it's like, it takes, like I made 2 last night. I probably spent an hour and a half on it.
Really?
Yeah, just because it takes forever to do it and then to edit it and then to make it and then to come up with your thing. And then like, it's just, it's a pain in the ass.
Do you make it in Instagram or do you use?
I make it in Instagram.
Okay.
Spencer told me, or not Spencer, Kyle told me about like Quick Cut or whatever.
Yeah, CapCut.
CapCut, but he said that's mostly for TikTok. And the problem is, like when I make one, if I'm not recording it, then I'm using a trending audio.
Right.
And you can't take the trending audio.
Into CapCut?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I have to make an Instagram. Like the one I did this morning was good. And then that walk one that will go out tomorrow morning, I think is really good too. And what's nice about the walk one is I did a stoic thing, like stoic philosophy, you know?
Yeah.
And so then I tagged all these stoic people.
Nice.
'Cause there's a shit ton of them.
Loads.
So it's like, man, there's 20 new people that I tagged that potentially could now become followers or engage in the content, you know?
Well, now you're at least in their tagged setting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was good.
If you guys want to keep talking, of course, feel free, but I'm ready to go if you guys are.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
We'll get started. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
Save that.
Your new intro.
Yeah, exactly. That's what my intro should be.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning and welcome to the first episode of Winning the Moment. I am Cody Ada and I am your host, and I'm super excited to be here today. This is episode 1. It was one of my annual goals I had for the year was to create a podcast. If you've found me before today's episode, then you know that I am a recently published author. My book, Winning the Moment, came out in January of this year, and I've been doing a lot of work to create awareness around that, and I thought a podcast is a great platform to do so. What I've realized, the feedback I've gotten from the book so far is that what people want is more antidotes of how to win, right? Because my book really talks about the philosophy behind why winning is important, the value of losses, change your mind, change your life. But I don't give a lot of examples of this is what you should be doing, because I wanted the first step for people to be just to figure out how to win for themselves and how to create that habit and get momentum in the right direction for them. And so the idea behind this podcast, I'm going to bring on a bunch of different guests from a bunch of different walks of life. And I want them to share with me their biggest wins, their biggest losses, how they define success, how they find fulfillment in their lives. And then I'll take all that data and I'll create book number 2, which will be more of like a how to win the moment than a why to win the moment. And so I'm really excited today. My first guest, a co-host from another podcast I do, Virtual GM Podcast, and he is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Vibrant Management. His name is Spencer Halford. Spencer, thank you so much for being my first guest.
I'm so glad to be here and so honored. Thank you so much for having me, Cody.
What's cool is that without Spencer, really this segment of marketing for my book wouldn't exist, because what we did is we went to a video conference called Grow with Video, and that's really what started the whole thing.
Totally. Yeah, it absolutely is.
And it was really Spencer who drove that idea home. If it was up to me, we wouldn't have went. I didn't want to spend the money. I can be a little frugal at times, but I'm so glad I did, because really without that conference, I don't know that I probably would have been on Instagram for the book, because that's like, where can you get a better audience? But I don't think I would have executed on Instagram in the capacity that I am now had we not gone to that conference.
Yeah, it was a really good conference. I'm glad we went. But I mean, by and large, like we have just learned so much from doing another podcast. And so
Absolutely.
It's really cool to see this translate and then move obviously into your personal brand.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about that. So that's enough about me. Why don't you let the audience know a little bit about who you are and how you got here?
Yeah, my name is Spencer Halford. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, in a town just north of that called Kaysville. I've always had a passion for sales and marketing. I got it from my dad. He could talk anyone into anything. He's very smart. He's articulate. He's a people person. He's a character. He's charismatic. And so a lot of that just trickled through his veins into mine. And even in high school, I had a deep interest in this. And I really sucked at school. I was a DNF student. But I had one teacher named Jeff McCauley. And for the rest of my life, I'll always reference this man. He forever changed my life.
What grade was that, Jeff?
That would have started in 10th grade.
10th
so
grade.
yeah, right. My first year in high school. And I only signed up for his class. My best friend, Jack, had signed up for his intro to marketing class, which was called The Purple Cow, which is in reference to a book by Seth Godin called The Purple Cow. And my friend Jack told me, hey, if you join this class, you get a free laptop.
Oh, wow.
I was like, that sounds cool. And I dropped like a foods class or something, and I switched into Mr. McCauley's class. And true to character, he was in a purple shirt, purple suit, purple shoes, purple tie, purple watch. And he was just like, no teacher was wearing.
Did he wear that every day? Or
No, that was just the intro day.
Okay.
And so we got into this book called The Purple Cow. And the idea, have you read that book?
No, I just wrote it down though, so I will read it.
It's a great book. You could get through it in 5 days. But the idea is like if you're driving through a field, like we're driving back from Salt Lake just a few days ago, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing but cows between Salt Lake City and St. George, right? Like it's just fields of cows and horses. But if there was a field of purple cows, you would pull over, stop, get out of your car.
Girl with video.
You would video it. You'd take a picture of it. You would FaceTime someone. You would call the news.
Right.
You'd be like, there are purple cows.
Yeah, something's going on in Fillmore, Utah.
Correct.
Something's in the water.
What's going on here, right? And so the idea of that book is like, there's so many, like we've got like water here, right? Like,
yeah,
there's so many water companies, right?
Right.
Like, how do you be the purple cow, which would be like a liquid death, right? Like a liquid death is the purple cow.
A great example,
right?
yeah.
And so we talked about how do you become the purple cow in an industry, and that was the whole book. We ended up working with Jones Soda, and it was this really amazing class. And for the first time, it broke the mold of school, and I felt like I wasn't a fish trying to climb a tree. I was finally in the river, and I could swim. And it just like...
Why do you think that was?
Well, I don't test well. I don't know particularly why. I think like when I'm the firstborn, and so credit to my parents for trying as hard as they could, but they just thought the school would teach me to read. That's wrong. So like I got to first grade and like kids are reading and I'm like, these figures have meaning? Like, what are you talking about?
So you felt like a little lesser than maybe?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think that, so you're a salesperson, as am I, also a hard time in school.
Yeah.
So I wonder if many salespeople share that trait of having a difficult time learning, because so much of sales is like figuring out solutions.
I think so.
And so I think, I can speak for myself, and it sounds like for you also, where we had such a hard time growing up, you're forced to figure out alternative ways to get to the same target, right?
Certainly.
And so really we start building those skills muscles of sales at a very young age, because we don't know how to do it the way they want to. So we got to figure out how to get to the same endpoint, but in our own path.
My mom would always tell me to stop charming the teachers because I couldn't do the work.
Yeah.
Me and my science teacher
I couldn't either.
We're best friends, but I don't know anything about science or the periodic table or whatever we were talking about, right? But I could be good enough friends with them.
Yeah, because if they like you, then they're going to be more lenient on you, right?
Yeah,
like, I don't want to give Spencer an F. He's just such a good kid. Let me give him a C.
And I'd try and do the things like I'd go in and like ask for help, and like they could see that I was making effort. But like while I'm in there, I'm like, oh, so how was your trip to St. George? And tell me about your day. And just
so you're just like how to win friends and influencing people. Then
totally, yeah. I'm selling them, but just on Spencer, right?
Interesting.
And so
I love that.
You're totally right. Like I would use an end route to get to the same place.
Right.
But in these marketing classes, and I took a marketing class every year in high school, and Jeff got me into this organization.
Because of Jeff, starting in 10th grade.
Yeah. It was the only class that made sense in my head, because everything in school is in a box. And in that box, I was bad. Like I couldn't figure out what to do, but everyone else could. But Jeff was like willing, day one in a purple suit, was willing to be outside the box.
And did you feel like inferior, or were you concerned, or did you feel like it doesn't matter?
Oh, yeah. I'll always remember in junior high, like for whatever reason, I was in a science class and Mr. Erickson decided to print out all these. It was like a class ranking thing, and there's 32 kids.
You were 32.
I was 31. And the 32.
You think that kid remembers?
Well, I know who 32 was. I was not super psyched. I was like, okay, well, like at least I'm not 32.
Yeah, right.
But like, I'll always remember being 31 out of 32 in science. And it was so like mind-boggling to me. First off, like I don't ever know why someone would be like, all right, kids, I'm going to tell you how you stack up against one another, like line up in order of smartest to dumbest. Like to me that's a little strange, but I'll never forget that moment. And so inferior is probably the right way of saying it, and he was not the type of guy that I could buddy with. Like I failed that class.
So here's a question. You remember it.
Yep.
So would you say, obviously in the moment, that was a negative experience for you?
For sure.
But looking back now, does it still feel like a negative
No,
experience?
absolutely not.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Right? Because now it's almost like a fuel
Yep.
to be like, yes, I remember this thing, and I'm separating myself from that memory.
Totally. I have so many moments in my life where they go wrong, right, quote unquote, at the time, or I just think like this is terrible or this is the worst, and then I look back and I think like, wow, I'd do that 10 times over again.
Almost always, right?
Every single time.
And so
right?
that's part of what I want to help people with, is to understand that failure is just in the moment. It's not permanent,
Yeah,
right? So I'm reading this
totally.
book. I told you about it on Tuesday, Outwitting the Devil.
Yeah, I added it to my reading
And
list.
it's so good. And
Yeah.
so I was reading it this morning before the podcast, and it was talking about, so in this book, Napoleon Hill is interviewing the devil, right? And so he's asking the devil, like, how do you take possession of people, right?
Yep.
And not in like a demonic way, but just how do you stop people from living a good, successful, positive life?
Right.
And he talked about failure, and he said failure, this being the devil, is one of my biggest tools. And the difference between people who become in my possession and those who don't are the ones who think failure is permanent.
Yeah.
So if something like that moment for you, right?
Totally.
If you feel like, oh, I'm always going to be 31 of 32, and I will always infinitively be lesser than, right?
Totally.
Those are the people who drift.
Yep.
But if you can look at it and say, well, in this particular science class, I'm not good,
Yeah.
and I will not be a scientist, and that's okay because I don't want to be one, then it's just this moment of inconvenience. And what he said is that actually failure, if used appropriately, becomes a vessel for success.
Entirely.
Because then it creates a motivation of like, I don't want to be second to last on any list ever, right? So so it really interesting to hear you share that
No,
perspective.
that's so true. And it's so funny that you even bring that up, because in my senior year of high school, I took the state of Utah's first and at the time only, and now it really was the only, because the state of Utah said no more of this. But I took the first and only social media marketing class.
Wow.
My senior year of high school.
And so you're a lot younger than me.
Yeah, but so like, I mean, we're talking like Instagram had just come out a couple years before. YouTube was just like,
Interesting. I didn't know they taught that in school.
they don't anymore.
They should probably.
Absolutely, they should. And it was just this spearheaded class by Jeff McCauley. And he was like, you know what? Like, this is going to be a big thing. It's no longer relevant for me to teach you about running ads in a newspaper or
Sure.
anything like this. Well, then one day a state curriculum advisor showed up and sat in the back of the class. And the class had no curriculum. Like, we were learning together.
Open forum discussion.
Open forum discussion. Let's go learn Google Ads. Let's talk about a case study that Red Bull did on social media and how it worked, right? Like, influencers weren't even a thing yet, but they were using public figures, right? Like, we were talking about public branding like that, right? Well, the state curriculum advisor shows up, sits in the back of the class ends. The next day we show up to class and Jeff is like, all right, well, the people of the state said that this isn't it's not a real class. Because we're not,
It's not a real class.
yeah, we're not doing like homework, and you guys aren't giving presentations. So my punishment is you guys have to give a presentation using PowerPoint. I'm sorry for that, but we're going to do. You all have to make a presentation on the importance of failure.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Yeah, and so
Serendipity.
absolutely it was, and I was like 16, 17 at the time, and I was like, wow, what a weird thing to. Failure is not an important thing. It's something you try and avoid.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so then like I went home and was like researching and made a PowerPoint. I'm sure I still have it somewhere because we were using Google Drive, right? Like we're very, very early into new technology.
Yeah,
right?
it's a little bit sickening to hear they had Google Drive when you were in high school.
Well, it was like newfangled technology that had just rolled out, right? In fact, that was another thing. They told him, don't use Google Drive. Like, you need paper assignments.
Wow.
But instead of submitting paper assignments, we would type them up, save it, and then put our assignments in the drive, into the shared class drive.
Okay.
Right?
So he was really ahead of the time.
Very ahead of his time.
What's interesting too in Unwitting the Devil, it also talks about when the devil's interviewing, saying that schools and churches are like some of his best tools, because the problem is churches create fear and schools don't create free thinkers.
Yeah.
To your point, right?
Totally.
Schools teach you how to just like follow along in a line, and what you really need to be successful or to create the life you want is to be a free thinker
Yep.
and determine your own outcomes.
I just finished the book, The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Uh-huh.
And he talks about how there's multiple dreams. In the 4 agreements, he talks about how there's 2 dreams, the dream that you live when you're awake and the dream that you live when you're asleep. Obviously, one of them you control. But then the dreams when you're awake is either your dream, which is the dream that you can control and you manifest and believe in, or someone else's dream, which would be like the school's dream or the church's dream,
Your
right?
parents' dream.
Exactly. What they want you to become,
Yeah.
right? In any capacity, your parents, your religion, whatever. And
Society.
yeah, right. But they are the masters of defining what failure is, and that failure lives inside of a box. And for me, school was always like boxed, like you're 31 out of 32.
Yeah,
right?
you're a
Like,
D.
yeah, you fail, right? And when you're young, and like especially like as the firstborn, not that that's like a crazy thing, obviously, but like I was a failure. And school is so important. And if you fail in school, you're going to fail in life. And like one of my counselors was like, I expect nothing more from you than just to live on the street. Like that's
wow.
That's what you're going to do, Spencer.
Well, that's the center of this episode.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
What a terrible thing for a counselor to say.
I don't know where they get the nerve.
Yeah.
For stuff like
Get
that.
that counselor out of here.
They should not.
It's the exact opposite of what they should be doing.
Yeah, it was pretty foul. Yeah. So that's kind of my background, at least in high school. I did DECA, which is competitive sales and marketing. Loved that. My senior year, I took first in every competition in the state of Utah. And then I ended up going to, I guess at state, I took third, but there's 800 kids there.
So was Jeff in Utah or was that in Idaho?
Utah. I grew up only in Utah.
Oh,
Yep.
you did? Okay.
Mhm.
I don't know
Yep.
why I thought Idaho.
Well, because after that, I went on an LDS mission.
Okay.
And knocked doors for 2 years, selling the hardest thing you can sell, which is religion.
Right.
Go and convince someone to
Cost them 10% of their income.
10% of their income and no more alcohol.
Is that how you opened?
No. At the time, I didn't think of it like that. you
Yeah,
know?
right.
And now that's just a funny joke, right?
Right.
But Canada was a difficult place to be a Mormon missionary. Like we learned rejection really well. The number one religion there is atheism.
Really?
It is.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's shocking.
There's not a ton of churches. If you were to drive through, I lived in Calgary.
Wow, how interesting. Why do you think that is?
Canada is a very educated country. Their universities are second to none. They're very, very, very educated. And so I believe that when their students just enter into university, and I've talked to some of my Canadian friends about this, they're able to push kind of their theist ideas to the side, and they learn more practical, realist ideas.
Sure.
And so I think religion is just kind of pushed to the back burner there. It's not a real thing, and not that it has to be a real thing, but I think you kind of trade in Canada religion for just basic spirituality.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot more people that would be like Eckhart Tolle groupies there than someone who's going to mass.
Got it.
Or
how interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah. I didn't know that until I got there. And Canada's a small country. The whole country has less population than the state of California.
Yeah, small in people mass, large in size.
Yeah, huge in size. But they're the.
I guess that's an obstacle too, right? Because you don't have as many opportunities to gather people together.
True. Calgary is a huge city. The city of Calgary has over 1 million people in it.
Oh, okay.
It's enormous. It's like a small New York City.
Got it.
So we never really ran out of people to talk to. In fact, one time my mission president, which is like the guy who oversees all missionaries, he's an older guy. My guy was like probably 68, 69. His name is Howard Nicholas. And one day he was like, all right, all of the cars are grounded, and missionaries sometimes are given cars to like drive back and forth and stuff. He's like, no more cars. You don't get any cars for the whole month of August. You're just going to walk and talk. And together as a mission, we're going to talk to over 1 million people. So we had to keep a tally.
And how many people were in your group?
Like how many missionaries or how many
like how many people were going to strive to accomplish reaching 1 million people?
We had just under 300.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people, right? Someone did the math, and I can't remember what it was, but it was like an absurd number of people.
Yeah, I'm just going to do that
every
math
day
because I'm curious.
And the month of August, I think, has 30 days. I could be wrong about that.
So that means every person had to talk to 3,333 people. And
Yeah.
so if it does have, how many days did you say?
I think it has 30.
We'll just say 30. So I guess that's not impossible. That's 111 people a day.
It's 111 people a day. It would be a lot but it's very doable. But you couldn't count like members of the church. It had to be new people.
Sure.
So we had to like go to downtown Calgary and like try and talk to
them. If you went to like a sporting event, you could knock out thousands in a day.
So that's where I got my idea. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm gonna kill it all.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go on the radio.
Oh, smart.
Jumped on the radio. Next thing I know, I'm in trouble. It's against the rules.
Oh.
And I was
Whose
like,
rules?
the churches.
Okay.
But,
Why?
Great question. For the sake of having a rule, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah, that seems silly.
But that was another thing where it just was like in this box and I was willing to live outside the box, right?
Yeah.
So I got in trouble for that. And I was like, well, if I can't go to the news, then I'll go to the newspaper. If I can't go to the radio, I'll go to the newspaper.
Yeah.
So I got in the newspaper. Got in trouble for that. Well, then the next week I'm walking downtown and Guinness Book of World Records is there. You can still see this video on YouTube. Guinness Book of World Records is there and they're breaking a record for the world's longest lemonade stand. And it's huge, right?
Longest lemonade stand?
Longest
like the
lemonade.
size of the lemonade stand?
It is, yeah. It spans 4 city blocks.
Wow.
Right? It is huge. And it has like little pillars between it and they say lemonade at the top, right? But, it's sectioned off.
Some of those things are so strange to me.
I don't know why they were doing it, but that's what you do in Canada for fun, So I was like, this is cool. Like, we can stand at this lemonade stand, give away free lemonade, and we can talk to loads of people.
Yeah.
So we're standing at this lemonade stand, and it's the world's longest lemonade stand, right? Like, there's not a lot of people that are coming up to us. Sure enough, CTV News is right up in my face. And they're like, all right. Oh, but beforehand, they're like, hey, can we interview you guys? Like, what's your story? And I was like, we're Mormon missionaries.
Because you've got the pants and the tie and the whole thing.
Yeah, right. And they'd given us some shirts that were like world's largest lemonade stand or whatever. And I was like, great, this is another opportunity to talk to 1 million people. So I'm asking them, like, what's your average viewership? Like, how many people are going to watch
so you
this?
can tick off your list.
Yeah. And they were like, yeah, no. I think it was like 10,000 people watch the news every night or something like that.
Yeah.
It was a good number. Got in trouble. And that time I got in a lot of trouble. And then like a few weeks later, like right at the end of this, there was a car show that was like meant for classic cars.
Yeah.
And so I was driving a Subaru Impreza that the church had given us. And so I decided to put that in the car show.
That's great.
Yeah, but I had written on it, like at the time the church was calling itself Mormon. So I wrote like Mormon.org all over it and I put a phone number on it. And I had brought 3 boxes full of Books of Mormon. And part of the car show was driving. So you like drove up and down this
Really quick,
street.
you said they used to, now what do they call themselves now?
Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Oh, that's a lot of words.
Yeah, so it fills your mouth.
Yeah.
So I had these boxes of Books of Mormon, and I'm driving. My companion's in the front seat. I got 2 missionaries in the back because I need help getting rid of these Books of Mormon. And we are blasting the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And I am as close to the curb as possible. And we are handing these out the car window.
So you're sitting in the car at the car show with the Mormon Tabernacle playing.
Yeah, but this is the driving portion. So all these
okay.
classic cars are going down the street, right?
Oh, because there was like a parade prior.
Yeah. But it is just the car show. Like people are lined up only to watch these cars drive up and down the street, and they're like revving their engines and stuff. And here we are blasting religious music, and I'm handing out the Book of Mormon out the car window.
That's amazing.
Because I was like, I wanted to be the purple cow, right? Like I'm not trying to disrupt or like do anything crazy inside.
Yeah, you weren't trying to be a negative.
Certainly not.
Because at the time you had committed your life to this thing.
Totally.
So you were just trying to do it in the best way that you believed you could.
But someone gave me this big goal of talking to 1 million people. Yeah. And I was like, how can I effectively and quickly get in front of all these people?
I love that. What a great story.
That's the one I got the most in trouble for. My mission president called and ripped me apart for that. He was none too pleased. And it's fine. Like now I look back and I carried a lot of resentment towards him, but he was like a corporate IBM man. And once he was done with that, he went and flew planes in the Air Force.
So he's just an order follower.
For sure an order follower. And I was very much not an order follower. I will be contained to my own rules, but it is very difficult for me to march this against Trump.
Breck always likes to say, like, Cody is happy to follow rules as long as they're his own. If I created the terms of engagement, then I will absolutely adhere to them.
Totally.
But and what's funny is most likely if someone created those exact same rules, I would naturally rebel against them because they weren't my own.
See, and I think I fall between the two where like I'll create my own, but if you give me rules, I'm happy to examine them.
You're just going to stretch them out.
well, if they're nonsensical, then I have no, like, if I
Yeah.
deem them nonsensical
Yeah.
and you're not willing to bend on them, then I will completely rebel
Yeah.
the other direction.
Yeah. It's always more of a ask for forgiveness than permission type.
Absolutely. Same. Yep. So I went on a mission, and then that's how I got to Idaho. So afterwards,
Okay.
I just decided I still wanted to go to a church school. So I went to Brigham Young University, Idaho.
So question, why did you want to go to school at all, given that school was challenging for you and you weren't a quote unquote good student? What was your desire to go to school?
A couple reasons. I had just lived in Canada, and Canadian universities are very different than American.
Okay.
Like it's almost like, what do you call the schools here? That's like,
Trade school?
no, Montessori.
Oh, yeah.
They're almost like Montessori style, where it's small groups. You learn as a collective.
Yeah, free thinking,
Hands on.
less structure.
There's no generals, right? And so I was just very interested. Like I had a growth mindset. Like I believed I had a big thirst for knowledge at the time, and so I believed the university would be helpful. I had met a lot of people in Canada that.
What do you think gave you your thirst of knowledge, given that as adolescents we're taught that knowledge comes from school, and you obviously, outside of Jeff, had a bad relationship with school. So where do you think that thirst for knowledge came from?
Probably because I'd just been on this 2-year life-altering knowledge quest,
Sure.
right? And some of it was like I had to wake up every morning and study. There was like study hour, and I loathed that just because like it was like confined. But what I was learning was like practical, and I would go out and like I'd knock on a door and I could deliver. And
you're building discipline and habits and behaviors.
And I was learning how to cook, and I was learning how to drive in a different country, and I was learning a
Yeah.
whole new political system, and I was learning all these different party affiliations, and I was learning about the Canadian dollar and how that economy worked, and like all these new things. And so like I was just immersed in this whole like thirst for knowledge. I went on my mission, a very hardcore Republican, and came home raging liberal. And then now I've balanced out, right?
Yeah.
But like, that I had learned this whole new system. And so
Sure.
like I had grown up thinking like in America, you're happy and everyone else is miserable. And
Yeah.
I straight up told someone like day 3 of my mission, I was like, well, you're not actually free. You live in Canada. And the guy's like, you're an idiot.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So I get that.
So I had this big thirst for knowledge. And I just wanted to like make something of myself. I felt like my life had been on the failing end because I'd only been on school.
Yeah, I was going to say, at any point at your life up to this moment, had you ever felt like you were successful?
No. And this was the biggest point of success in my life because Canada's number one religion is atheism. Missionaries there are leaving with an average of 0 baptisms, right? Like they're maybe getting
Sure.
1, right? And I'm baptizing 8 people.
What about when you went DECA though?
I had lots of success feeling in DECA for sure.
Okay, so that's kind of what started. That was your first wins.
For sure. Yeah. And like I did like sports in school, like not at like high school, but like I'd play city league baseball and
Yeah.
soccer and stuff like that. And I had fun with that. But DECA was like for sure personal and professional wins.
Is it
all
the
at same
first time that you felt like, oh, I can be successful in something?
Yeah, it absolutely was. And it was really nice too, because I'd have these DECA wins and then parent teacher conference would roll around and I'd make sure I'd want to take my mom to go meet with Jeff McCauley because I knew he'd say something good.
Yeah, right.
Well, all the other teachers are going to say something terrible. Right?
Yeah.
Like he hasn't turned his homework. He's
Yeah.
distracted in class, whatever. And I'll never forget there was one parent teacher conference where my mom was like, how come he's able to do so good in your class? Like, are you just too easy on him or
Yeah.
what's going on? And he was just like, you never have to worry about this kid. Like he's going to be fine. School is not built for Spencer Halfords.
Sure.
It's built for the people that are good at taking tests and following
Yeah.
a structure, and they're rigid and they're always going to be like that their whole life. But he will be very successful outside of school.
Yeah.
And it's evident he's successful outside of school. Look at all the trophies that are in his room
Yeah.
from DECA.
Right.
So, I mean, he really was a big switch point in my life.
Do you think that your success in your mission was spurred by your DECA success? Like, had you not had that DECA success, do you think you could have converted 8 people on your mission?
No.
Yeah.
No, not at all. I mean, so much of it is just talking to people, right? And
Yeah.
it's, without like getting too deep into, spirituality or religious beliefs, a lot of it is like connection and how you make that other person feel.
Absolutely. Well, that's what selling is, right?
Yeah.
No matter what, whether it's pest control or a book
Yeah.
or a religion,
Right.
it's built on connection, right? And
Yep.
people buy from people they like. And so if they like you, really whatever
Totally.
that thing is that you're selling them, they're more inclined to accept it because really they're accepting you.
Totally. And on my mission, it's interesting. Your first companion, which is someone that you work with for a period of 6 to 12 weeks, he broke his leg. And so we were kind of down for the count. Like we really weren't going out and talking to people. We were just nursing this dude's leg. And the guy after him was just a good time. He just wanted to go out and have fun. And that was, Mormon missionary fun is like,
Go play church basketball.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. But my third companion is named Steve Lazome. And whenever I have a kid, I will name that child after Steve in some capacity.
Nice.
He truly saved my life. And just on the note of selling, I'll never forget day 2, we're in our apartment. And he's writing in this notebook. And I didn't know what he was writing. And he gave it to me. And he said, these are words that we will never say to someone we're teaching. Right. And even now, I just did it actually. He had something like Mormon missionaries call someone they're teaching an investigator, right?
Oh.
But when I say investigator to you or anyone that's
Seems
not
like you're in trouble. It's bad.
correct, it's like a private eye.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't say like, hey, you're our investigator. You're someone we're teaching. Right?
Yeah.
Like so, it was funny that I just caught myself doing it right now. I didn't know that.
Yeah, words are so important.
Yep. Another thing that Mormons say very frequently is like, I want to bear my testimony. But a testimony is something you share in a court of law.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're giving testimony to a scene.
Yeah.
Right? Instead, we would say I share my witness. Right? Like this is something that's personal to me. Right? We would always say like, instead of sacrament, we had different words. Instead of like atonement, we had
So you just made it
sacrifice.
more digestible.
Very digestible. And then on a separate column, he had, these are battle topics. These are things we just don't talk about.
Smart.
We don't bring these up at all.
Yeah.
And here's what we reroute to if we do.
Wow. So you built like a roadmap for sales success.
Yep. In fact,
What was his background? I mean, obviously, he's just a young kid too, but
no, he was older than me.
How did he have all that knowledge?
He's just a very smart man. He's French Canadian, so he speaks French and English.
Okay.
A very, very intense thirst for knowledge.
Yeah, must have.
Yep. He had a bachelor's degree at the time that I was with him. So
Oh,
I was
wow.
18. He was 24.
Oh, so he had, okay. So
Yeah.
then he had all those years of life. He had 6 years of life.
Correct. And he had
hadn't had
also
yet.
taught at college. He taught math and physics in French.
Okay.
Right. But he spoke pure French. Like the French on the east coast of Canada is called Québécois. Like if you want to tell someone in Quebec to back up the truck, you say back le truck.
Got
right?
it.
Like
Yeah.
it's like very like mixed
Yeah.
with English, right?
Uh-huh.
But in French, I don't know how you say it. But Steve was teaching pure French. He was teaching math and physics using pure French.
Okay.
Right. So he's very, very educated.
Sure.
He grew up in Barrie. I think he taught at the Barrie, Ontario University.
Okay.
So he knew how to present in a large group.
Got it.
To make it understood, because what he hated was getting asked questions after. He didn't like
Okay.
that. He wanted you to give everyone all the information and then not be questioned about it, because he felt like he might not be doing a good enough job explaining it. So he's very meticulous in his
So someone asked
presentation.
him a question, he felt like that was a knock on his explanation because he left
Correct.
something out.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Or it wasn't explained clear enough. Right?
Sure.
So then we started doing this thing called a 10-minute first, which was being able to teach the first lesson that you would teach to someone learning about the church inside of 10 minutes. So we'd do a stopwatch and a timer, and we had to get through all critical points for someone to understand and explain it perfectly inside of 10 minutes.
So you really went at it with a real intention. You
Yep.
guys built all these positive habits and
For
behaviors
hours.
around success.
For hours every morning. We would study, we would rehearse. There was one morning we did over 15 10-minute firsts.
So really you were winning the moment by going through the conversion prior to ever even meeting with the person.
Entirely.
So like when
Yep.
you met with him, it was just like second nature at that point.
It was just rolling off my tongue.
Yeah.
I knew what to do, right? And we got so good at it. My mission president heard us doing it. He's like, holy crap. Okay. Yeah, that's the standard. Everyone do that. So we started just going around the mission, and we would teach missionaries how to teach.
Yeah.
And that was, and there are other missionaries that are supposed to do that. We were just missionaries. So there was like 4 levels of leadership above us that could not teach. Like they could not teach a missionary.
Wasn't in their nature.
Well, if I knew definitively, if those 2 missionaries went into a room and we went into a room and we were teaching the same person, we will baptize that person and they will not.
Interesting.
Guaranteed. By the words that we use.
Absolutely.
We will share the same message and we will be the one to baptize them.
It's really interesting. Words are just so important, and
Entirely.
the way that you use them and the function and how you use that as a tool. So I think that's a really cool story.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was my mission. I love that.
That got you to Idaho because then you wanted to stay in a religious school.
Yeah, got me to Idaho, stayed in a religious school, ended up there. I got married there. I'm divorced now, which is another great lesson. And like, that was something that was very, very challenging for me.
Yeah.
And then now I look back and I'm like, wow.
And probably harder too, because in your religion at the time, marriage is meant to be,
Yeah. And divorce is a little taboo inside of Mormonism. I think it's lost some of the taboo-ness. I don't know what you call it.
Because more common now, just naturally.
Yeah, it's just what happens. Like, I think people are more willing to call a spade and just not, hey, this isn't working anymore. But yeah, that was, at the time, I felt like my life was falling apart, and, I was like heartbroken and in despair and whatever. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, I would do that 10 times over again.
Yeah.
Just to be where I am today.
It's so interesting because, how can you give people, you can't give someone a perspective that doesn't have it. But it's so important to understand that when something challenging or some obstacle that you encounter in your life is just genuinely in that moment of time.
Yeah.
Right. And because
totally.
it can feel like forever when you're in it. Like in that moment of divorce, you probably feel like, I'm never going to get married again. I'm never going to feel better. Like this is going to stick with me forever.
Yep.
And so it's like, how can you build those mental muscles so that way you have the understanding of like, this is what's happening. And I know it's going to be positive moving forward, because you can only really measure success backwards, because so often people in all these different environments feel like, I'm not successful. But then if you were to ask their previous self, like even like a kid who's in college, but they feel like, I'm behind because I haven't started my business yet, or I don't know what I'm going to do. But then if you ask them in high school and you're like, hey, you're going to get to go to the school you want to go to, how would you feel? They'd be like, oh, that'd be amazing. But then they get there and now they're already looking at the next thing.
Totally.
And forgetting that they've already been successful in their endeavors.
Yeah.
Right. They're in that moment. They're not yet to the next moment.
You're so busy looking at the future reward, and we're always so good at moving our own goalposts. Right?
That's why you can never get there.
Totally. You can never get there, right? And that phrase is like, stop and smell the roses,
Yeah.
right? Like, that is such a true thing. We're always our worst critic, and we'll always hit the goalpost, but we've moved it so many times that it doesn't feel like it's actually something that we've won.
Because once you get there, then you want to do whatever the next thing is, right? You're always progressing.
Very rarely is there a goal that is a threshold that we cross and then we take long enough time to celebrate it. The poem, it's in Breck's office, the Desiderata.
Yeah.
So I got like obsessed with that after I read it in his office.
Oh, so that was your first encounter with it, was in the office?
I'd never read it. But so I read it in the office, and then I had it as my screensaver on my phone for a while. I had it written down in my bathroom. There's like this, like on the mirror.
Yeah.
There's a really amazing reading of it on YouTube. But there's a line in there that says, take time to celebrate your accomplishments as well as your failures.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah. It really is like a perfect outline of like how to conduct one's life. But I always love that, because one thing that I'm really bad at is like, I'll accomplish something, but maybe something like in my past or childhood, or probably like part of school, is like, it's not good enough. So I'll like search for something.
Because you're still got that childhood trauma of being 31 out of 32.
Correct. Right. And so for me, like getting the homework assignment in was a win.
Yeah.
But the work on the homework was not a win. Right. For me, the win was getting it in.
Yeah.
Because my brain just does not function that way. But now, like professionally, like I've been able to succeed so much. Right. And then personally too, like my personal life has never been better.
Yeah.
And so
it's been fun to see that progression just from when you started with us a year ago to where you are now.
Yeah, I've kind of wondered what that's like to be a fly on the wall and watch
it's been fun to watch the journey.
The personal life progression of Spencer Halford. It has been a lot, like even within the last...
Because you're just barely over a year right now. Like crossed over in February. So you're at like 13 months right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, even in the last 4 months, I've lost 42 pounds.
I know, yeah. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. I got on the scale 2 days ago, and 178.
Oh my gosh. You better stop or you're just going to evaporate.
I don't know how to stop. I truly don't. I Googled. So recently, for anyone listening, I switched to a plant-based diet, and I've just been losing weight in like crazy.
I mean, there's got to be a weight that you don't want to get below.
Well, I'm kind of at it now.
Yeah. So what do you do now?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Like if I lose more weight, then I'm probably going to have to figure something else out, because it's gotten to the point, like 42 pounds is a rapid decrease in weight.
That's a lot.
So I Googled like, why do I have this rapid weight loss? And the bulk of it is like, well, you're going to lose all this weight, but it'll probably come back like in some capacity, like you'll probably gain 5 or 10 pounds back once your body levels out. because it
It
is
normalizes to your new diet nutrition.
yeah, and in some level, it is doing like a little bit of a toxin flush because the majority of the food that I'm eating is like whole foods. It's prepared. Like I'll make like a bed of spinach with like rice and quinoa on it, with grilled onion or grilled peppers, tofu, beans. Like I'm eating like really good whole foods instead of just like crap that I put in the microwave or like another pizza.
You're shopping on the outside of the grocery store.
Correct. Yeah. I love the inside of the grocery store though. There's good food in there too. But like I think my body is just like, whoop, getting rid of all the shit that was built up in there.
It'd be really interesting to see how that continues to progress. I was actually just thinking, because we need to do our quarterly review. Oh yeah, which we normally do at Sakura. Yeah, and I was like, I'll probably have to pick something else. We won't be getting sushi anymore. Okay, so that's a good transition point. Something that I want to ask all my guests to define for the audience, and you can take this question with the creative liberty to answer whatever capacity you desire. Mm-hmm. But what would you say is your biggest win in your life?
Wow.
Yeah, tough.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you before because I wanted to just be able to get that gut reaction. It's a hard question to answer.
There's so many that come to mind.
That in itself, I think, is important, right? Because I think we can find ourselves in this position of feeling like we've never succeeded or we've never won, because all you're thinking about is just like whatever obstacle you have right now.
Yeah.
And you're forgetting that like no matter who you are, what you've done, we all have successes and wins in our life. Totally. And that's really the idea behind the bracelets, is let's bring that to the front of mind of people so they can understand, like, even for me today, just reading my 10 pages prior to coming to the podcast, that was a win. It's small, but it is a win. And that's going to allow me to register that in my mind as like forward progression and to build that momentum. Right. And so, again, creative freedom to answer that in whatever capacity you desire. But what's the win you want to share, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. The win that I would want to share would be, I don't know how to set the stage for this, but once upon a time, I had my own marketing company and I sold it.
Yeah.
And it merged with another company. And because of some documents I've signed, I can't go too crazy into some of these details. But the moral of the story is I was miserable. And my friends that worked there were miserable. And I was a slave to a company physically and mentally.
Yeah.
I could never leave the company. I would leave work and I would get in my car and think about work and how miserable I was. And I would go home and think about how miserable I was. And I'd go on vacation and think about how miserable I was. I'd put in a request to go on vacation. They'd get denied for whatever reason. Some arbitrary, I made rules and I don't like you.
Some box.
Yeah, right. And I'm outside the box. And I also had a very high leadership role in this company too. As the VP of sales, vesting into equity, right?
Yeah.
And so, I was just simply miserable. And there was a lot of other things that were happening too with other partners that just created an actual hell in my life. But the catch-22 of this was I was making more money than I ever knew what to do with.
And so that kind of kept you in that hell.
Yeah, I was buying hell.
Right.
I was being paid.
Because we can be told and taught that money is happiness.
Correct.
And so then you're at like this catch-22 of like, in this hand you have a bag of cash. And so you're supposed to be happy.
Right.
But in this hand, you're miserable. And the only way to get this hand to be happy is to get rid of the thing that's supposed to make you happy.
Yep.
So it's this real quandary of like, wait a minute, I can't let go of the cash because that is meant to represent happiness.
Correct.
And so then you're afraid if I let go of the cash, all I'm going to then have is just misery. Because now the one thing that I had that was making me happy is also gone. And I'm now left with just misery. And so until you know that that's not the case, that's a hard decision to make because you certainly don't want to lose the one thing that you can feel like accomplished with.
Totally. Yeah. And
She'll edit it out.
We'll have to cut that out. Yeah. That was really the hardest thing for me, was that it was a catch-22. Like I was so miserable, but I was making enough that I felt like,
well, not just enough. Yeah. A lot. Top 1%, like a significant amount of income.
And I could like have whatever I wanted. I had a Tesla and I lived in an amazing, beautiful house. And
those things society tells us are meant to indicate happiness.
Made me happy, right?
You had a title.
Yeah, exactly.
All of it. All those boxes were checked.
Yeah. And it was like a figure, it was like something impressive that I could tell people, right? Like,
it probably made it harder for yourself to understand the level of depression or frustration because you're probably thinking, how can I be? What's wrong with me? Because I have all these external factors that are meant to equal happiness, and the equation's broken.
Yep. Well, and I'm so far mentally removed from this situation now that I can't remember all the details, but
Sure.
I know that there was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I don't remember what it was, but it just sent me into a spiral, and I was angry and mad and sad and frustrated, and I just felt like a slave. And I had a good friend that was going through it too, and finally, like, I just sat down and I had a conversation with a good friend, and he ultimately painted a picture of like, you're going and you're building a company that you hate, and you're benefiting people that you really don't like.
Yeah.
And all of this is not even supporting you. Like, you leave, you're miserable, you're unhappy. The only benefit that you're receiving is a check, but you're paying into this far more than they're paying to you.
Yeah, you're at a net negative.
Exactly. And so really, like, once I was able to understand the reality of the situation that I was in, it was kind of like, now that I knew, I had to acknowledge it and do something about it, because I couldn't just...
So like that brought it to your consciousness.
Yep. And now something had to be done. I either had to choose to live in a world where I was just going to simply ignore that.
You had to choose to lose.
Correct. I had to choose to lose, or I had to choose to do the right thing. I had to win the moment.
Yeah.
Right. And ultimately leave that company. And my plan was to bet on myself. Right. So that's when I called you.
Yeah.
And told you that I'm leaving. And ultimately that call was basically just to tell you that I was going to leave, so that...
Because you were our contact.
Correct. And that I was either going to go start my own thing or something, but I'd always admired you guys and loved what you guys were doing. And I thought you guys were cool, and I enjoyed our interactions. And so just on a whim, something I didn't even plan on asking was, if you guys have anything, I'd be interested in that.
Do you think the biggest motivating factor in that was that one time you came to the office and I threw the ball behind my back into the face?
Certainly helped.
Well, and what's funny too,
that's pretty amazing,
is when you reached out, my initial reaction was like, well, I can't pay you.
Yeah.
Like, yes, of course, work with us. We'd love that. Right. And we'll create the opportunity, and we've got this seat, and we're doing EOS. We know that we need this person to fill this role, that you embody all of those traits.
Right.
But we can't afford to pay you. I mean, we can pay you, but not what you're used to earning, you know? So that was tough for us, because you want to be able to pay someone their worth and their value, but in any new company, that's just not always realistic.
Yeah. And I've always loved new companies. And so for me, like, I understood in that same conversation with my friend that leaving, regardless of what capacity, whether it was with you guys or whether it was my own thing, or if I tried some corporate job for a while, I don't know, I probably wouldn't have done well in a corporate job.
I don't think so.
No. But regardless, like, I was going to take that paycheck, and instead of getting it, I would be purchasing happiness.
Yeah.
And peace of mind and freedom, right?
Yeah.
And so the question you asked is, what was my biggest win? I traded lifestyles rapidly, and it has been single-handedly the best investment in my personal health and my mental health that I could have ever made. And I'm far happier. In fact, do you remember one time I told you I needed to, like, leave for half the day to go to the DMV or something? I can't remember. And I asked you and Breck, and I was like, hey, I'm so sorry. This is an inconvenience, but I have to go to the DMV. And you guys laughed hysterically. You guys were like, oh, yeah, I'm super inconvenienced by that. Breck, aren't you inconvenienced by the fact that he has to leave for 2 hours to go?
Right.
And then, like, you know, just put it in perspective, where I was like, oh, wow, I really came into this with some trauma.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, this is a safe place where I can grow.
You can
and
be a
myself.
human.
Yeah. Just be a human. So that's my biggest win of recent years.
So if I was to say, finish the sentence, my biggest win was
investing in my mental health.
Okay, that's awesome. So then the duality to winning is losing, right? And we already kind of touched on it today, and how important losses are, and that if a loss is just a moment in time and not in perpetuity, that it generally has huge value for us, right? And as humans, we are going to lose more than we win. That's just the nature of the beast, right? And so you've got to be able to build that mental fortitude to break through losses so you can win.
Totally.
And so what would you say is the biggest loss that you've endured up to this point in your life? And I don't mean loss as in like a human, unless that is what your biggest loss was.
Yeah.
But again, creative freedom for you to answer that in whatever way it means it to you.
Sure. Yeah, and we've all, like, had the loss of family members. Like, both my two of my grandparents passed away last year, which was challenging. And then, like, my grandma Halford was just, like, tried and true rock for me, right? Like, I still visit her grave almost every time I'm in Salt Lake. But there's always one experience that I'll go back to, is like this was my biggest loss. But now, like, same thing. I do it 10 times over again just to be where I'm at.
Yeah.
I got hired. I used to travel the country and teach professors how to teach their digital marketing. I loved that job. But ultimately, living on the road was challenging. I'd be all over the country for 2 weeks at a time, and it was exhausting. So I left that job and I started working for an ads agency in Idaho Falls. And I really never quite like fit there.
Yeah.
I knew
Too many boxes.
Yeah, and just it was a small ads agency. Like it was smaller than Vibrant.
Okay.
There's probably 7 of us.
Okay.
The thing that was unique, and it's actually funny because Vibrant fits this mold somewhat, but like everyone there went to high school together. And I was like the transplant. Right?
Okay, yeah, so the outsider.
I was the outsider, and like I was good at the skill, right? But they would just make like these really strange rules. And anyways, I did like the job actually, and I thought the people were kind. But one day, like, and my ads worked. Like we were getting an amazing return, and we worked with like roofers and carpet stores and car dealerships all over the map. And back in the good old days, like Facebook would tell you like, this is how many cars you sold. Like this, this is how many roofing appointments you got.
Yeah.
Like their ads, it was like the Wild West. Like you could track anything.
Yeah.
And then Cambridge Analytica ruined all that. But now, one day they just came in unannounced, and I'm in there early creating a funnel, and they came in and they're like, hey, we got to talk to you. And they fired me.
Oh.
For no apparent reason. So I was asking for like reasons, like, the campaign's not good.
Were you married at this time, or so then it's extra devastating because then it's like not just
Totally.
Obviously it's hard to get fired at any time, but then you're also responsible for your family, and so then it's like extra hard.
Yeah, totally. And my wife at the time wasn't working,
so you were the sole contributor.
Yeah, right. And so it was like very, very hard, and they couldn't give me a valid reason. Like there was like they had me sign something and it said like reason, and it was blank. Like, and it wasn't financially.
Yeah.
And then I found out like 2 days later that they'd hired one of their friends from high school.
Oh, just to replace you.
Yeah. Just as like,
yeah. Okay.
They're a friend.
Yeah.
Like
they need a job and we care about them more than you.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah. It was very hard, and like, I'll never forget, like I went home and like opened the door and like saying like, hey, I got fired was really challenging. Like I never thought I'd be the person to get fired.
I'm sure driving home was like just running through your head. Like,
oh my gosh. Like,
did you tell her before you got home, or did you wait till you got home?
No, I waited till I got home. And then an hour later I signed up for Lyft and started driving.
Oh, wow. I didn't never know that.
Yep. I signed up for Lyft because I was like, screw you guys. Like, I'm still going to get out there and make money.
Yeah.
So I started driving for Lyft about 45 minutes later, and jumped in the car and was moving people from the airport to wherever, and from downtown stores to wherever. And
that's a great example of resilience, right? Like, because you didn't allow it to demolish you.
Right.
And instead you said, here's this thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
I'm only in control of my actions.
Right.
And my response is going to be to instantly replace income.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny because like on LinkedIn, you can see who's viewed your profile.
Yeah.
And so I'll watch them like hit my profile.
Oh, yeah.
Every now and again.
Right.
And I'll float out like a heater of a podcast. Just like, suck it, guys.
Let them know they made a mistake.
I haven't forgotten about you.
So how long do you think that sat with you?
Well, mentally it sat with me for months.
Yeah.
But like in action for, an hour.
Yeah.
Not long. And that's actually what started my actual business is I got fired, and we were kind of tinkering with the idea of moving to St. George anyways.
So that's what created the...
Yep.
And I think that's such an important story, because I think that what people have to understand is that there is this bigger thing around us, right? Like if you zoom out on us, we're pretty insignificant.
Totally.
We feel like we're the stars, but realistically, in the sense of the universe, we're the smallest, most... nothingness, right?
Yeah, nothing.
And so when something like that happens, it can have the impact of devastation. But we don't understand is that was the catalyst to get you to St. George, which created your marketing company, which created your next opportunity, which ultimately led to us.
Yep.
And so you can only know those things.
Yep.
Now looking back, you don't have the luxury of knowing the positive outcome from this failure until you get through it. So I guess the advice or the direction would be, know that failure is only in the moment, and that 10 years, 5 years, 6 months, as you look back, you would never hope that didn't happen.
If you understand the value of failure, it is a springboard to success.
Absolutely.
The next day after getting fired, I found a list of businesses on the Chamber of Commerce St. George website, and I called every single one of them. And I set appointments with about 30 companies to come down and run their digital ads. And then I got on a plane. I flew to St. George. My dad picked me up, took me to a BNI meeting.
Oh, wow.
Signed 4 clients there. And then I had clients, meetings with other people.
Yeah.
And so before I had moved to St. George, I had 10 clients in St. George just for my own marketing company.
And now you're working for yourself.
Correct. Yeah. I'm working for myself. And then I was gonna go to school, but I only ever went to one class because I was like, well, I'd be going to school to do exactly what I'm doing right now. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I dropped out of school, grew that business, and absolutely loved doing that.
How long was it until the other company bought your business?
About 2 years.
Okay.
Yep. So 2 years, they acquired me, and then we grew that company to be the largest web developers in the state of Utah.
Yeah.
And we made an amazing product. I mean, still to this day, it really is a product. We use it.
Yeah.
The product that gets cranked out of there is by far the most amazing website you can get.
Yeah.
And it's a relatively affordable price for one too.
Absolutely.
So, that for me, getting fired from that ads agency, I was able to use it as a catalyst for just an enormous and a preposterous amount of success.
Absolutely.
In so many different ways. It led to a better personal life, financial life, mental health space. It got me out of Idaho. I hated that place.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. So in every way, it was a positive.
Correct.
So then if we were to put that into a sentence, your biggest failure was being fired.
Correct.
And isn't it interesting? Because your biggest failure is also the catalyst for your biggest success.
Totally.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then as we get ready to wrap up, you've read some of Winning the Moment. I don't know where you're at in your journey.
About halfway through.
About halfway through.
Yep.
Okay, so up to this point, what would you say is your favorite premise from what you've read so far?
Like what's one of my favorite takeaways from that?
Correct.
Well, I was talking to you about some of it in the car ride home, like just learning about like the car deal and how how some of that
the
went down,
Ponzi
right?
scheme.
Yeah. The thing that I have taken away from it, the majority of it though, and I was even having a conversation about this last night, is that there is no definition of what winning is, at least for me and you, right? Like your definition of winning and my definition of winning are different.
Absolutely.
Only because our lives are different, right?
Yeah.
So I've always appreciated, I've heard you say 20 different times, like if your version of winning is you go from 5 Dr. Peppers a day to 1, and to you want to start to eliminate that, then that's a win, right? But maybe it's more intense, right? Like for me, like I love going to the gym.
Yeah.
And so like I try and go 4 times a week, right? And if I can hit that 4th time, to me that's a win, right?
Yeah.
And if I get to that 5th time, then it's like I'm superhuman.
Yeah. So anything less than 4, you feel like you let yourself down.
Right.
4 is the moment of success, and anything above 4, it's like that's extra credit.
Correct. That's a win for me, right? Or waking up at a certain time, or making your bed in the morning, or whatever, right? Like I love the premise in that book that we are free to determine what our wins are, because that does go back to like Don Miguel Ruiz 4 agreements, right? Like the dream that you control is the dream of when you're awake, right? And it is only your dream. It's not the schools. It's
your
not the
consciousness.
churches. Yeah, exactly. You are free to define your wins. And I love that part.
Okay, well, that's awesome. The last thing I want to leave you with before we end today is, how do you define success?
Success is happiness. Just what in your life equates to happiness? If you're making $50K a year and you can take your family on one vacation to Disneyland a year, and you're home for dinner every night, and you get to play with your kids, and then that's success.
Isn't that amazing that you can define it in one word, right? Yeah. And how do you think you would have defined success when you were 19?
Dollars in the bank.
Yeah.
Yep.
When do you think you pivoted? When did that change for you?
Probably with that conversation with my friend.
Yeah. I wondered if that was going to be like, that's where it switched.
Yeah, it really has been the day I joined Vibrant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark it on the calendar. That's the day I pivoted.
That's pretty nice. So you actually can look at the calendar and define when your definition of success changed.
Correct.
So how do you think we can help the younger audience listening? So most of like my followers are in that like 18 to 34 range.
Okay.
Right. So they're in that space where you made that decision.
Yep.
What advice do you have for them because part of my direction, right, is to find success for yourself.
Yep.
And it's so difficult, I think, to not tie it to money when you're younger.
Totally.
Because we're just taught like that you have to have that, you know? And so what would be your advice to the younger audience listening as to how they could go about finding an inspiration to define success in an alternative term?
Two things. Number one, fill your ears with positivity. Only listen to the
excellent.
Yep, to the positive. I remember when I started my ads agency, no one believed that it would be a success.
Sure.
My friends and family would talk to me about how businesses are likely to fail within their first year, how they don't make a profit.
Isn't it interesting how the people on the sidelines are so willing to let you know why something's not going to work?
Yep.
Right. So you got to change the sideline.
Yep. So I put Gary Vee in my ears, and I lived with my headphones in for a year and a half. And it wasn't until finally, like, I was getting awards at the Chamber of Commerce and things like that they finally were like, oh, maybe it's working.
Yeah.
And, I think that was interesting, but I was able to fill my head with positivity. And there are so many amazing sources of positivity out there that if you don't have it from your circle of influence, like your friends or your family, then you need to find your own. And if that means distancing yourself from the negativity and that negative source and not being a dick about it or being rude, and you can just say like, hey, like I'm going to be doing my thing over here and just fill your head with positivity. That's the best.
It's perfectly okay to say to someone that you are negatively impacting my life, and until you're able to be a positive impact, I can no longer have a relationship.
Absolutely,
with you.
It is. Yeah,
right.
entirely.
And I love that advice of find the source of positivity somewhere.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't exist, find people who have it, or to your point, put a Gary Vee in your ear, put an Eckhart Tolle in your ear, pick up a Don Miguel Ruiz book, like find that source of inspiration.
Fire up a Tony Robbins, So if and speaking in business, like Gary Vee, I'll always remember there's one episode, I listened to it 20 plus times, and he always says like, if you don't have positivity, I will be your cheerleader. Like, put me in your ears, like I will cheer for you. Yeah. And then, the second bit of advice I'd have is just the only opinion that matters about your life is your voice. And right now I'm reading the book, The Voice of Knowledge by Don Miguel Ruiz. The voice of knowledge is the voice that is inside of us. It's the voice that guides us. But the dream of the school or the church dampens and softens that voice. He even talks about how the first sin that happened in the Garden of Eden was not the disobeying. It was the disobeying of themselves.
Absolutely.
Right? They knew that they shouldn't do this. And they loved where they were. But because of an outside voice, Satan, who lived in the tree, they were talked into something that was not their voice of knowledge, and therefore they sinned against themselves, right? Whatever sin is.
Yeah.
Right? But they listened to a lie. They went against the voice of knowledge. So the only opinion that matters about your life is yours.
Wow, what a banger. What a way to end it. So I'm going to ask you again and just give me the two pieces because they're so good. The two pieces of advice that you have for the young audience listening is what?
Fill your head with positivity. What was the second thing I just said? Fill your head with positivity. And the only opinion that matters about your life is yours.
Ooh, that's good. I can't imagine a better way to end than that. And what's really interesting too is that's all off the cuff. You had no idea what I was going to ask you.
I had no clue. I didn't.
And that is so good and so powerful. So I hope the people listening take that to heart because honestly, if the only thing you get out of that podcast is the last 30 seconds, that's enough to fill you for a week.
Well, I appreciate you having me on here, man. That was really fun.
Yeah, thanks for being your first guest. It's pretty cool.
I'm so glad to have been the first guest.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And for those of you listening, you can find us on iTunes and on Spotify and on Instagram. Please like, comment, share, subscribe to the podcast. I'm going to do one once a week, and I'd love to have your support. Thank you so much for listening.
What a banger.
Banger.
Yeah, that felt really good.
That was so good.
Yeah, I felt like that was just an...
Okay. I will mute myself and I'll also mute Spencer as well, and then you can take it away.
Okay, thanks, Mallory. Today on the podcast, Winning the Moment, we have our guest speaker, Spencer Halford. He is the VP of Sales and Marketing at Vibrant Management, and you're going to want to listen to the entire episode because in the last 2 minutes, he drops some absolute bangers. So please stay tuned for the whole thing and enjoy the episode.
Nice.
Okay, thank you, Mallory.